皆様、おはようございます。
Good morning,
おはようございます。
ladies
今日
and
は
gentlemen.、
イーティングデザイナーマライエ・
And
ホーゲル
today
サンド
we
さんが語る
have
食べることかけるデザインの、
Mariah
トビラオープンレクチャーにお
Fogelsack,
越しくださいまして本当にありがとうございます。
for our lecture today.
今日は2時間の
And we
で
have
マラ
a
イエさんに
2-hour
オランダから来ていただいておりましてお話聞いていただき
And
ますが、
Mariah has traveled all the way from the Netherlands.
プロジェクトオープンレクチャー
Now,
というシリーズの
this is
第
the
7回
Tobira
目に
project open lecture. This is its 7th.
トビラプロジェクトっていうのは初めて
And
聞いた
I
方も
believe
いらっしゃる
many of you
と思
will
うんです
be
が、
hearing about the Tobira project for the first time.
私が東京都美術館の学芸員稲
And
と申します
I am
が、
Inaniwa from the Tokyo Metropolitan Art Museum. I'm the curator. And the Tokyo Metropolitan Art Museum and the Tokyo University of the Arts are doing this project.
Yes, my name is Ito.
稲庭さんからありましたように、
So as
隣に道
Inaniwa
挟ん
san
で一本
said,
向こうにですね、
across the road there is the Tokyo University of the Arts. We're right next door to the Tokyo Metropolitan Art Museum. Together, through art, we're trying to create a community. That's the project we're engaged in. And now, through open lectures like today, we've been holding events like this.
このトビラプロジェクト
So this Tobira
の活動の
project,
テーマと
the
まあ
theme of your
今回
activities,
マライエさんにお話しいただく
and this time what
テーマと
Mariah-san is talking about,
共鳴するような
they
テーマなので
resonate with
ぜ
each
ひ
other,
マライエさんに
these
お話し
themes.
していただきたい
So
ということ
we're
で
very keen to have
お願い
Mariah-san
したいと
talk about her themes. That's why we've asked her over.
会場の皆さんに
And
ちょっと
everyone in the
聞きたい
audience,
ことがあって
we wanted to ask you,
今日は食べることと
today,
デザインする、
so
デザインという
eating
ことで
and
興味を
design.
持ってきていただいたと思うんで
You
すけど
came
も、
here because
皆
that
さん
interested
トビラプ
you.
ロジェクトって
But
いう
regarding the
プ
Tobira
ロジェク
project,
トご存知だった方ちょっと手を
who
挙げて。
knows about this project? Could you raise your hand, please, if you've heard of it? Oh, there are quite a lot of people. Maybe about half of you who never heard of this project before.
ちょっと多いかな。
Maybe
ぜひ
larger in
ちょっと
number.
トビラプロジェクトの
So
ね
please
知っていっていただけ
do
れば
get to know about
そう
our
ですね
Tobira
マライ
project.
エさんのお話の前
Yes,
に
before
少し
we ask Mariah san to speak, we'd like to talk a little bit about Japan, eating and design in Japan. Examples, and then about the Tobira project, what activities are we engaged in? Maybe Ito-san could give us an introduction, and then we'll introduce Mariah-san after that. Yes, please.
ちょっと1枚目のスライドこちら
So
なん
the
ですけれ
first
ども、
slide is this one. Can you
こ
see?
れはですね、ちょっ
This
とトビラプロ
shows
ジェク
you
トの写
part
真
of
ではな
our,
くて、
this is not
僕
from
は
the Tobira
福島県
project. I'm
出
from
身で、会津
Fukushima
地方ですね
Prefecture, from the Aizu
森
region.
の箱舟アートプロジェクト
And
ってい
this
う
is
アー
the
トプロジェクトを
this is
ディレ
the
クターとし
Forest
て
Arc
3年間くらいやって
Forest
ます
Arc
これ去年の
project. I was
で
director there for about 3 years, and last year there's a place called Kitakata City, an area called Sosogi. This is a remote area in the forest. It's a wedding. You said in Aizu? Yes, that's right. This is a forest wedding. Ever since the earthquake, Aizu is closer to Niigata, so the damage was not that bad. But the forest culture, there was the impact of the nuclear power plant accident, and it became more difficult to be in contact with the forest. And the local people wanted to once again recognize their local area, to think about what their attractiveness, what their cultures are. That's why they chose the motif of a wedding. That's right, because people always eat at weddings. That's correct. There's always a meal or a feast. So eating is important. And the production was done by Masatoshi Iwa, an artist. And regarding this wedding, he looked at this as a theme so that in the region, the customs regarding weddings or the food, the ingredients that are used, once again, with the people of the region, they reviewed this. With modern day ways of thinking, what kind of food could you serve? Or as part of the tradition, what kind of performances might be put on together? We thought about this together in this project. And at this time, what's the role of the artist? So the people thought about this. An artist creates sculptures, paints paintings. That's what people often think an artist is, but actually that's not it. That's not all. There are attractions that lie dormant in the area, or cultural things that have been handed down. The profoundness, people who feel these are customs, just a part of daily life, that are actually very valuable. traditions that should not be forgotten. So weddings, food that is served at weddings, eating this together and thinking about this led to the local people noticing things. That's the role here of the artist. So sculptures and paintings, you just look at them, but eating means that you actually have an experience. This is chicken being prepared. So there are customs regarding the kitchen. The new wife will be coming to her new home, and in the kitchen, the wedding feast is being prepared, so she'll go and say hello. There was this kind of custom. So this is a performance that copies this. So this is related to people in this village, Sosogi, and they wring the neck of the chicken, and they prepare it, turn it into food. That was included in the performance. And this shows you local people. So using food, using ingredients that are served in today's weddings, how could we do that as part of this project? This is very beautiful. So this is a real wedding? It's an actual wedding? Yes, that's right. And plus, it's been put on as a performance, and about 100 people came together. That's right. So the couple were actually getting married, but the audience came. There were people from the general public who came as if they were attending a play at a theatre, but they were invited to the wedding. So were they part of the actors or were they the audience? They were kind of halfway in between, which means that so weddings, culture in my own local area, how were they? Or what are the attractions of my own local area? So overall, together with the artist, so people were participating or being shown. That's the kind of place that was created. So eating became a major key word, I think. So this kind of thing, culture, it's been created by people. It's not something that suddenly appeared. It's people who created these customs or people who created this. That's why for decades, for centuries, it's been handed down through people. That's why, as something that links people, it still functions today. So this is like an accumulation, layers of time. And I am actually involved. There's a bond between me and this as well. Those are the bonds that are created. And this is where it disappears. Once the project is over, then it goes back to an ordinary rice paddy. This is done in a rice paddy, but so the Tokyo Metropolitan Art Museum and the Tokyo University of the Arts, our Tobira project is based in the museums. There are lots of works of art, lots of cultural assets, heritages in the museums. But what we have here, the works, through our works, we want diverse people to be able to connect with each other. That's the kind of place we're trying to create. In 2012, that's when we started, and we're in year 6. That's right. So the Tokyo Metropolitan Art Museum is here, and the Tokyo University of the Arts, and the Tobiras, the art communicators. We have 130 of them right now, and they overcome a relationship of being worked on and working, but they're on an equal footing, and what links them is the work of art. So the values that people feel, we want to deepen them, make them more profound. And I wanted to show you a movie about this. So the Tobira project has a website, and you can see movies from there. We're going to show you a short version today. So what are the art communicators? What are the Tobiras doing? If you could just get a feel of what they do. A museum has a kind of a stuffy image, but this is a place where you can come without worrying too much. In the past, me in the past, a place where I can fulfill myself, a place that will accept me, big energy and power. where miracles are possible. A lot of miracles all over the place. The Tobira project. So the Tokyo Metropolitan Art Museum and the Tokyo University of the Arts, we link people and works, people and places, more than 100 Tobiras. So I am an employee and a Tobira. I'm usually a university student and I study art history. I teach students. I am a teacher. At the museum, we no longer think of museums as a place where only experts are. A lot of people come together and think together. Those are the times. Basic lectures. So this ability to listen, if that's left an impression with you, please raise your hand. So I'm speaking here today thanks to your listening to me. So all of you mutually, if you mutually have good hearing abilities, that's good. Listening abilities. Special Monday course. Through dialogue, we enjoy the works. Open the lid and what do you think will come out? Access practical lectures for written communication. For people with disabilities. Architecture lectures. One of the characteristics of this museum is this wall. So the craftsmen whittled away at this to create these bumps. Bricks, tiles that are brick-colored. So that's a unique characteristic of our museum. New ideas. So they're a combination of what already exists. So ideas belong to people, but people need to provide their ideas to see if we can create new combinations. That would be nice.
So when you open a Tobira or a door, people will naturally gather, and that will be the basis of activities. Now we have the Tobi Double, and I would like to show you some of the activities that came out of this. This is where people pretend to be the girl in the picture. So children, we lend this to children, and of course we may erase it, but before that, we take a photograph of the picture so that children can take them back as a color picture. And we have some of the major spots within the museum in this guide. As an art communicator, what can an art museum do? So the art communicators themselves would be thinking about what role they should play and what activities they should carry out. It is not a job that is given to them. It is where the art communicators think for themselves and create new jobs. So we have many pieces of art. We have a lot of people gathering. This becomes a power spot, and that power from the art museums could be spread out by the Tobiras to all corners of society.
So as you just saw, I'd like to go over that a little bit. So Inaniwa-san says, not just experts, but a variety of people come together to think about museums. Those are the times. And our advisor, Yoshiaki Nishimura, says, New ideas are a combination of what already exists, so people need to provide their ideas to create new ideas. And I was saying that it's not just the work you're given. The art communicator himself or herself needs to create his or her own role. That's what we're saying. So this is, what does it mean? So art communicators right now are themselves thinking. And while discussing with us in the museum, they're actually setting up programs. This is one example. Today, to all of you, we've given you Tobira project orange-colored brochures. So in the brochures, there are a variety of activities or setups. So please refer to the brochure for the details. And this project, what you're seeing on the slide now is written communication through art, dialogue type appreciation. People who can see, people who can hear, of course, they can communicate. However, if you have hearing disabilities, if people can use sign language, then they can communicate. However, if you don't know sign language, and there are people who can hear and people who can't hear, and then if you can't do sign language, it's difficult to communicate. So we have Tobira, a voluntary setup. This team thinks about people with hearing disabilities, people who can hear, so they can experience a lot of things together. And the impression they get from the works, they can share these profoundly. That's the kind of workshop they thought of and actually executed. You have a lot of different programs, more than 300 times you had lots of meetings. Very unique program, a lot of them. So this shows you a typical day. The Tobira project, we have about 130 people as Tobiras, art communicators, and from the ages of 18 to around 70 years old. We have a very large age group. And this is a typical day, a weekend, Saturday or Sunday, and by table, activities like the ones I just explained. How, through the works at the museum, can you link people, connect people? So this is the Tobirabo. A lot of these meetings are being held. We have about 300 of these a year. And the programs themselves, about 20 or 30 a year. On the website, we have a lot of movies, videos. If you are interested, please do take a look. So the Tobira project, what we're trying to do is, what's important is art. We want lots more people to love art, but not just that. The works or cultural assets, these exist at the museum. So the function of the museum needs to be something that's delivered more to society. We need to function more towards society. The existence of the museum should not be discussed only by experts, by a diverse group of people. So nationality, religion, race, culture, disabilities, values. So diversity should be valued in our society today. And this needs to be a place where diverse people can recognize each other and hold a dialogue. That kind of place is needed in society today. In that respect, art or museums. So this needs to be a place where people can, this needs to be a place that can create empathy, a place where people can feel empathy. So this isn't just experts, it's people on an equal footing. And in the dialogue, people from far away, you should be able to connect with them, that kind of relationship. So we're thinking of a place and an opportunity for doing this. That's the Tobira project. So right now, today, eating is the theme. So art, the concept keeps on getting broader. So things like statues, paintings, that is not just art. But communication, creating a place where you can communicate, or people's memories, looking back, creating opportunities for people to look back over their memories. Activities of artists are also broadening, and the activities of museums too are broadening to a variety of activities. And the Tobira project, when I do this, that's how I truly feel. Right, as you can see on the slide. So what's important in human relationships is it's not just creating or building new relationships, it's realizing existing ones. And it's not being wary of damaging relationships, it's feeling that they are real. So people being involved with others, sharing values, and communicating, that's very important. And when we do that, today's theme of eating. So a diverse people eat together and they communicate with each other, and there are things they can notice. There's culture that's related to eating. So eating is something we do every day. However, through a filter that's not everyday art, actually as part of our daily life, you can feel the substance by going through this filter of art. So this way of thinking, artists can show you a different way of seeing the world. And there are lots of things we need to build on there. So today we have with us Maraie-san, and we'd like to hear what she's doing. We're looking forward to hearing what she has to say. In various parts of the world regarding eating, under the theme of eating, she's been holding workshops, installations, and after going back, she's going to the US immediately, I hear. So she's flying around the world. Now let's hear what Maraie-san has to say. Thank you.
And she arrived in Japan on Tuesday. And she has been visiting several places on the theme of eating. I understand she went to Kappabashi and looked at the food samples that's created there. So, Maraie, please.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm really excited to be here. I also want to thank the interpreter, because I always think about how complicated that job must be to be an interpreter. So, hello, thank you. So I come from the Netherlands, and you might think it's strange for me as a Dutch person to be speaking to you about food. I'm very much aware that in the Netherlands our food culture is not as elaborate and evolved as your food culture. So I have a lot of respect for your food culture. But the thing is, I am educated to be a designer. So I was educated to be a product designer. So I went to the Design Academy in Eindhoven in the Netherlands. And when I was a student there, I was, just as all the other students, I was trying to find my perfect material. So some people, they work really well with wood, or with ceramics, or with plastics, or with glass. And so as a student, I wanted to find my kind of magical tool. What could I use to express myself with as a designer? I want to tell you, I was actually a really bad designer. I could not make tables of wood. I could not make ceramics. I didn't know what to do. And every day after a very hard time at school, I would come home and then I would cook my dinner. And every time I would cook my dinner, I would be opening my cupboards and looking at all my kitchen tools. And then I was thinking, you know, food is a material as well. As a designer, you can also start to work with food. And once I started to discover that when you work with food, it also means that you work with everything in the world, because the whole world is related to food. And I started doing this about 20 years ago. And back then, at the Design Academy in Eindhoven, no designers were working around food, because food was just not something that designers would be working with, because designers would always make things that last. But I'm actually quite happy that when you work with food, that the food will be eaten and that it will be gone. I'm really happy that I don't make things that last. I'm really happy that I don't add to all the mountains of waste that we already have into the world. And when I started working with food, people told me, you're a designer, you work with food, you're a food designer. But if I was a food designer, it would actually mean that I would be designing food. But when I look at food, I see food is already perfectly designed by nature. I don't need to design new kinds of food. I think food is fantastic the way it is. But what I do like to do is to look at the act of eating. And by the act of eating, I mean everything. So I'm looking at harvesting food, at growing food, at preparing food in the kitchen, at sharing food at the table, at what happens when you eat food physically, but also what happens when you eat food mentally, in your brain. What kind of memories do you have? What kind of associations do you have? What happens with the other person that you eat together with? What happens with the bond that you have? I look at culture, food culture, at eating rituals. All these kind of things, they interest me as a designer. And when I started working with food, I didn't really see this potential. But now it's 20 years later, and I see that there are more and more young people starting to work with food as a designer. And I think if we look at our food system, and if we see all the challenges that we have because our food system is on a global level very sick, I think we need creative people inside this food system to come up with creative ideas to find different ways to think about the food system. So for me, personally in my work, I am very much busy with trying to change perspective on food. Because right now, when we look back into the history, we are living in the most abundant time ever in history. The food that we eat on a daily basis is amazing. There has never been that much food as that we have right now. If we look back into the history, we see that most of the world population have been hungry. But now, of course, there are still people who are hungry, but we are actually producing enough food for everybody to eat. And I think it is interesting to see that we are actually living in the land of plenty, the land that we have always dreamed of. That's actually the state of our global world, where we have so many food and it's so diverse and it's fresh and most of it is safe. We can rely on the food most of the time. And this never happened in the past. But most of us, we don't realize it because it's just there. We don't think of where all this food came from. We don't think about that we used to be hungry. We just consume the food. And what I try to do with my work, I try to make people aware of how special it is, what we are having now. And I also try to make people see the things they are dealing with on a daily basis in a different light. So that is my personal take on food and design. So today I'm only going to talk about the human connection with food, but I'm just briefly want to take you through all the different possibilities that food and design can actually have. Because as a designer working with food, you never only work with food, you always deal with the context around it. So if you look at food culture, then you can look at the whole world and you can see that everybody around the world eats in a very different way. We use different rituals, we use different ingredients, we use different tools. We have very different approaches to food and we have different etiquettes. So that can inspire you as a designer working with food to change the way you work with food or to change the way you approach food. And you should not forget that every food culture also had a history. That's why I really appreciate your project about the wedding, because with food we can actually recreate culture. We can look into food history and we can take back historical facts that we actually were forgotten about, and we can bring them back to our contemporary world. And as a designer or an artist, you can actually recreate something new with that old knowledge. Well, the food system, as I said before, I think is very sick. The way we are producing waste, our monocultures, the way we are dealing with animals with antibiotics, the way seas are getting empty because we fish a lot. All these issues are very big issues. And I'm not saying that designers are going to solve everything. That would be arrogant. But I do think that designers can bring something in, a new way of thinking to make people more aware, or to help farmers to find a new way to deal with their waste, for example, or to find a new way to deal with production, so that we can, in small little pieces, disrupt the food system and turn it around in a positive way. Well, food rituals, it's like food culture. It's something that you can look back into history, but you can also wonder, you know, our lives have been changing. The way we are dealing with work, the way we are dealing with family, the way we are dealing with our position in society changes. Maybe we can also think about new rituals that we can create, that we can share, and that we can use to give our lives in our contemporary society a different meaning. Food science, obviously, is very interesting. I think a lot of people don't think about it, that when you eat a mass-produced food, and all of us do sometimes, that there's a lot of science behind it. And it enters our body on a daily basis. A lot of science is actually going into our bodies through our food. And I think this is a very interesting fact. And I think within science, there's a lot of research being done, but there's not a lot of creative thinking. So I think if you would link designers or artists together with scientists and then work on food as a subject, I think that could be a very interesting part. Obviously, food and nature is very interesting, but also kind of confusing because we hardly see any nature back into our food, and especially if children grow up into an urban area, it's really hard to know where your food came from. It's really hard to understand that milk comes from a cow instead of a factory, or that a carrot grew under the ground. So I think designers or artists can do a lot about education of where your food came from, or how it actually grew, or what to do with it. Food within our society is something that we are very much aware of, but at the same time, we are not. And it's a kind of paradox within food, that we really value food and we think food is very special, but on the same hand, we eat behind our computer screens, or we throw things away. And I think this is something that designers could work on as well. Psychology. Food is part of your brain. Food is actually, when you want to eat, then the choice of food is, in many cases, not made by your stomach, but by your brain. Because our brains are focusing on food from our natural past, because that's what we need to survive. And I think as designers, to understand food psychology and to understand how the choice for a food works, we can really work with that. But today I want to talk about food and human connection, because some people say my work is about food, but when I'm really honest, I think food is actually, my work is actually about other people and human connection, because food is more an excuse for people to get together. Food is an excuse for people. It's kind of a glue between people, and that's how I work. So I'm just going to show you a few projects that show how I use food and how I get humans connected. This is actually quite an old project. I did it maybe 15 years ago. And this is a project in a museum in Rotterdam. And Rotterdam, maybe you know the story, it has been severely bombed at the end of the Second World War. Many people died of starvation simply because there was not enough food. This museum in Rotterdam, they invited me to make a project with food from this time of the war. So I went to the Resistance Museum and I got some beautiful, original, handwritten recipes. People just had very limited ingredients during that time. For example, they started to eat the bulbs of a tulip or sugar beets just because they didn't have regular food anymore. I was very curious about these ingredients, so I just started to recreate these dishes, and I presented them very simple on some cardboard sheets. And what happened then is many visitors of the museum were actually children during the time of war. And when they took a bite of food and put it into their mouth, they actually didn't taste these flavors for over 65 years. So they put it into their mouth, the flavors, of course, the food went to their belly, but the flavors and the memories started to enter their brains. And by entering their brains, they got back memories of the time that they were children. They got back memories of the time that they were in the war and that their parents were still alive. And the interesting thing for me, and it's called the Proust effect. Everybody knows this effect, that sometimes you eat something and you get a memory back from a time past. Everybody knows this effect, but as a designer, to really consciously work with this is very interesting because it's a very specific thing, if something triggers a memory or not. But for me, the interesting thing was to see that actually people don't know that they have these memories. The memories are locked into their brains. And through food, you can unlock the memories. And suddenly, they have regained a new part of their own past. So I'm going to show you a video now, so this is quite an old project, but the video is very recent. It's just 3 weeks old, of the same idea with a woman who was about 14 years old during the time of war.
14歳でした。戦争が始まったのが1940年5月10日。頭上輸送機がuit de vliegtuigen springen. Dat waren de moffen.
I'm fascinated by food, not necessarily about the taste of the food, but more about what it does to people, or how I can use food as a tool for people to communicate, for example, or how I can use food as a tool for people to have memories about themselves.
Ik ging dan met mijn vriendin naar de Zwarte Markt. Dat was ook in de Jordaan, ik weet het ook niet meer zo precies. Nou, zij had altijd geld, want de ouders zaten allemaal in de zwarte handel. Dan kon je een plakkaat kopen, 11 gulden, een plakkaat. Dan deelden we, dan kreeg ik ook een stukje. Ik had geen centen.
Smell and taste immediately enter your brain in the center of your emotional being. So they don't have to go through the whole processing of the language part in your brain. Marcel Proust was a writer, and he has been describing tasting a madeleine, which is a French little cake that he was dipping in tea and eating, and he was describing the memory that he suddenly got of his childhood.
Ja. Toen zeiden we tegen mijn moeder, maak je peertjes? Nou ja, dat was dan die suikerbieten van heel. Ja, mijn moeder was een vrouw, daar kon je de moord mee plegen. Die sprak wel natuurlijk wel, maar je hoorde nooit. Want het bleek dat ze ook nog in verzet wat heeft gezeten. Mensen naar onderduikadressen, daar hebben wij ook nooit wat van geweten.
As a designer, you like to create a kind of environment or a kind of setting to have people have a certain experience. And the Proust effect is really hard to grasp because you never really know what would trigger someone's memory. You never really know what has happened in this person's life, and you don't really know what kind of food or what kind of smell would be this trigger.
In de paardenkant. Samen emoties zaten in de doosje. Doosje brak. Samen emoties vielen in de paardenkant.
Samen emoties zaten in een doosje. Doosje brak. Samen emoties vielen in de paardenkant. We
speelden op straat altijd. En toen waren we met de springtouw met vriendinnetjes. Toen kwam die vrouw, en dat zal wel een Joodse vrouw geweest zijn. En die werd kwaad en die zei, nou moe. Toen vertelde mijn moeder dat mijn vader ook Joods was. Dat heb ik toch ook nooit geweten, er werd helemaal niet over gesproken. Dat was toch niet nodig voor de oorlog?
When you use food to kind of grasp these stories, they become more tangible and they become more alive. So I think food is a great tool to make really living memories.
Mijn moeder was chefin op een atelier. En die had een baas en die had een notitieboekje met namen. Die moffen, die zochten die man. En die hebben dat notitieboekje gevonden. En dan zijn ze al die adressen afgegaan. Nou, toen kwamen ze bij ons ook. We hadden net een Joods meisje hadden we in huis. En toen kwamen ze binnen. En toen gingen ze overal in de kasten kijken en vinden koekjes. Toen zeiden ze, nou, jullie leven er goed van. Ja, zei mijn zuster, mijn moeder is jarig. Nou, had hij gezegd, dan hebben jullie een hele mooie herinnering. Zei die kerel. Toen is mijn vader meegenomen en dat meisje, dat is meteen al doorgestuurd. Nou, naar Auschwitz. Ik heb mijn vader daarna nooit meer gezien.
When it comes to the experiences I make is to touch people eventually. Maybe sometimes they're touched because they're very happy and sometimes they're touched because they feel emotional. And sometimes they just understand a little bit more about the bigger picture of the world because they have been experiencing my work. And that is what I aim for.
I'm just continuing because I want to keep track of time. So that was very much about memory, and I think memory is something wonderful because this is what human beings can really consciously focus on memory. That's what we all have. All people in the world have memories, and these memories make who we are. They are part of our identity. So a couple of years ago, I did a project in Lebanon with the founder of the first farmers market. His name is Kamal Mutzawak. And he says that even though Lebanon has been very much destroyed during wartime, the culture of food is a culture that cannot be destroyed because we recreate it every day. And he says that whenever we eat food from the soil of Lebanon, we actually take the earth of the land back into our bodies. and therefore we rebuilt the land again. And with him, I did a project about the Green Line. And the Green Line is a line that divides one part of the city of Beirut and the other part. So in the middle of this city, there's a kind of, well, they call it the Green Line, but it's a place where you cannot enter. It's like an empty wall. And so what we did is we did a workshop with very many different people from very many different backgrounds, because one of the issues in Lebanon is that there are so many different segregations in different little cultures that have a really hard time to deal with each other. And all these people from different backgrounds, we got them together to do a workshop. But all of them, even though they have very different ideas about life and about the world, they all have memories about the Green Line. They all have memories about the war. And so what we did is we recreated bread bowls together as a workshop. And we made them green with parsley, because parsley is a key herb in Lebanese cooking. Parsley is very important for Lebanese people. So we made these green bowls of bread. And the idea in Arabic of sharing bread together is a representing of being connected together, or being friends together. They say once you break bread together, then you are friends. Also, the French word pane for bread comes from companion, the people who break bread together. So in this culture, bread is very important. And then once we made these bowls, and I asked everybody to, when they were making these bowls, to put in their memories of the time when they were in the Green Line. So they put in all their memories in these bowls while they were making these bowls. And eventually we were presenting them in the farmers market, and we were inviting everybody who was there to come and eat these bowls together with some Lebanese cheese, to eat the bowl and the cheese together, and then to share memories of that time. So the idea was that by eating these bowls, all these memories of these hard times would just be absorbed by everybody. So we would all share the memories physically by eating these bread bowls. And of course, because we used the parsley and the bowls were kind of green, we're also eating away the Green Line. I think what I like most about working with food is actually not very complicated. I really like simple things. I like memories. I like working with children. My own children are a very big inspiration to me. And I like things that all of us as human beings can relate to. So I like not to focus on the differences between cultures, but I prefer to focus on what makes us all the same. So it makes us all the same that we have memories, and it also makes us all the same that we were fed when we were children. So when you are a child, you are being fed. And I think it's a fascinating thing that once in your life you have this period of time where you cannot eat yourself, so someone has to feed you. But then you grow up, and then you don't have to be fed anymore. Maybe sometimes your lover will feed you, maybe once or twice, but I don't see that a lot. And then when you grow old again, and maybe you are not able to eat yourself again, then people feed you again. And the whole act of feeding is very much about trust, and it's very much about, psychologically, it's quite kind of a complicated thing to do, because it's about trust, and it's also about how you deal with each other. It has a kind of power relationship that can be very nurturing, but can also be hurting. So you have to, when you are being fed, you have to open up to be fed. And it's not very easy, especially as an adult. So I did a project that evolved over time. I started in Denmark, in Copenhagen, trying to research what it is to be fed. And after that, I went to Russia, where you can see here, this is in Russia, where I did a workshop to understand what it means to be fed. And what I like is not only to feed someone, but also to tell a story, because I like the idea that actually food goes in your mouth. It goes in. But stories, they go out of your mouth. And so in my head, storytelling and eating are linked to each other. So I made a workshop with about 30 people, where we were, half of the people were the feeder and the storyteller, and the other half were the feedee, so they were receiving the food. And you can wonder why we did this. And well, first of all, we did this because I think it's very funny. But second of all, I noticed that if you would feed someone, a stranger, because these were all strangers to each other, if you can see each other, it's very scary. It's very scary because you would make eye contact, and then you would think, oh no, someone is going to feed me now. Oh, I have to smile because I want to be polite. But you feel really bad inside. It's not a nice thing. And I want people to be able to relax. So I did a lot of tests in my studio, and I found out that if you cannot make eye contact, even though it's just because you are underneath a very thin piece of textile, then you can relax because you cannot see the other person. You feel more anonymous, even though it's just a very thin shell. So that's why we have people sitting underneath the tablecloth, and their whole body just transforms into one single mouth. And the food we were using was very simple food because I wanted the participants to understand, to take food that they had personal memories of. So we had a collection of typical Russian food that Russian people were likely to have memories of. And I asked them to take this food and then to feed it very gently to the person underneath the cloth. And while they were feeding, to explain very detailed about their own memory and about exactly the flavor that they were tasting while they had this memory. So for example, if you would have an apple, you could tell a story about that maybe when you were little you went to pick apples with your father, and you went to the apple tree, and exactly when you eat this apple, what happens? You hear a sound, maybe you feel the juice of the apple in your mouth. So to really precisely describe what happened. And what we noticed is that the people that were being fed, even though if you don't like apples, because they were listening to the story of the person that was feeding, they really experienced eating this apple in a very different way than they would normally, because normally they would not have any story with this apple. So this is the feeding going on. It's actually a lot of fun to watch this happening as well. And then we also did it here at Roppongi Art Night 3 years ago. And for me it was very interesting to see also a different culture, a different kind of food, but on the other hand also a very same approach. Because when I have been observing this project, I see that people are, sometimes when we read newspapers, we get very depressed about humankind because we read about horrors that happened in the world. But when I see this project, I get very positive because I see that people are very gentle, that even because you're strangers, sometimes I saw that some people have some food around their mouth, and then the stranger who is opposite of this person wipes it off. And I think that is very gentle and very, very, very nice to see. And people were having a lot of fun, even though they didn't know each other. Some people were having a really good time together in this kind of strange situation. Another workshop that I did is very different. I have been fascinated by cooking in clay. Cooking in clay is an ancient cooking method which originated in China, but also the old Indians used to put a whole animal in clay. So you have a whole animal, you put clay around it, and then you throw it in the fire, and then it cooks. And when the fire is out, you can easily take the clay off, and the fur of the animal sticks to the clay, so you immediately get to a really nice, juicy, cooked meat, because the clay will keep all the juices inside. And you can also do this with root vegetables. So I've been just fascinated by this, so I've been cooking a lot of root vegetables. And then what happens? You have to break the clay again to get to the food. I actually like to. And I think it's interesting because clay also can make sculptures. So if you have a sculpture, normally you put it on the mantelpiece and then you admire it and you think it's really beautiful. But now it is a kind of difficult thing because you break the sculpture because you want to go to the food. So it's a dilemma. Do you want to eat this humble root vegetable, or do you want to keep a beautiful sculpture? Well, in the end, everybody goes for the food, which I'm happy about. So I've been doing a lot of workshops trying to research this kind of way of cooking. But then I was invited to come to South Africa. And South Africa is called the Rainbow Nation because it's a very diverse mix of very many different people with very many different skin colors. And obviously, that's a very complicated situation. But I think it's also a beautiful thing. And while I was working with this clay, I noticed that all the colors of clay that you can find in the earth, in the world, this whole color scheme is actually the color of skin. It resembles the color of skin. It goes from very light white to very dark brown and everything that is in between. So I was thinking, you know, if I am in South Africa and we do this root cooking, then we can have all these colors of skin. And then when you put your root vegetable inside the clay, you can make a sculpture of a human being with a face. It's a kind of golem. So there's a mythical story attached to it. So we did this workshop and we were making lots of faces. And I like the idea that eventually you have to break this skin color. And it is a symbol. For me, it symbolizes that the outer color of skin is not important. It's about what is inside that counts, which is actually the root vegetable. And I like to think about South Africa of the roots of humankind. The roots of humankind are in Africa. That's where we originated. So it made a lot of sense to me to make make this project in South Africa. So the last project I'm going to share with you, because I think the time is almost over, right? No? Okay. Is a film. I'm going to start a film. I'm not going to explain too much about it, but what you need to know is that this project was in Hungary, and it was in Hungary with gypsies. And gypsies in Hungary are really seriously rejected by society. So that is a very important thing to keep in your head when you watch this film. This is a performance around a group of Roma gypsy women. I think if you want to think about understanding between different social groups. I think food is a very, very strong tool that you can use to create a bond between people. To create understanding for Gypsy people, I think to use food is one thing, but then to be fed by someone is another thing. And I think that's why also it's only women, because it's mothers that feed their children. It's this kind of essence of life. I think the idea of feeding is a very intimate. A mother feeds her child with food, but also with love at the same time. I thought about making this installation where people are getting physically fed with food, but also with stories.
Az almával az a kedves emlékem, hogy összegyűltünk így gyerekek, és engem a nagy gyerekek nagyon-nagyon szerettek valamiért, lehet, hogy azért, mert betyárka voltam, és vittek magukkal, és kerestek egy nagy házat, ahol nagyon sok a almafa. És beloktunk, és hát leszettük az almát, és majd jött a parasztember, és így nagyon kellett rohanni, nagyon-nagyon futottunk, szóval életem első olyan futás és utolsó, és akkor futottam. És utánam kiabálta, vagy utánunk kiabált, hogy te büdös cigány, és kiderült, hogy csak én voltam cigány.
The installation is made in a way that you can't see each other. You're sitting under the table, you have this little tent, inside there are pictures and text and a flashlight, and it's a kind of strange environment. And then you sit there and the lady tells you her memories and the memories of the food that she has, and she will include you in her life in that way.
Karácsony volt, és bejött egy ilyen, nem tudom, ilyen tenyeres talpas nőre emlékszem valójában. És volt egy lány, akivel folyamatosan együtt mentünk házról házra, mi az intézetről intézetre, vagy nem tudom, hogy mondjam neked. Ő szőke volt. És akkor bejött, azt kérem, meg azt kérem. És akkor így valamiért kellett mennünk vele, kimentünk ő hozzá, és egész nap takarítani kellett, vagy jöttek a vendégek, és betettek minket egy ilyen hideg szobába, de nagyon éhesek voltunk. Vissza is vittek minket este, és annyira gyönyörű volt, annyira szép, csodálatos szép, mert csak mindenkinek lehetne ilyen karácsonya, hogy így kinyílt a díszterem ajtaja, és megláttam a magas fát, csodálatosan feldíszítve, és sok-sok gyerek ott eszik, és kiabál, és beszélget, és jól érzi magát. És a slusszpoén az, hogy csak akkor ehettem narancsot. Karácsonykor ehettem csak narancsot, és kaptunk mindenféle tárgyakat, ilyen hülyeségeket, és én elcseréltem narancsra. Elkezdtem így, hogy neked adom ezt, te add nekem a narancsot, és rengeteg narancs volt.
If you have had that experience and someone shared her food with you and her story with you, you cannot hate that person. You have to like that person. It's Immanuel Kant that said that if you break bread with each other, you can't break each other's neck.
Adok egy olyan dalt, amire gyerekkoromban mindig elhallgatott egy nevelőnél. Jó? Csukd be a szemed. Légy szíves. Szél viszi messzi fellegeket, s mögötte lángol az ég. Nyújtsd ide, édes a kis kezedet, ki tudja, látlak-e még? Ki tudja, ölele a két karom, ki tudja, csokol-e a szád galambom, ki tudja, mely nap és mely hajnalán indul az után tovább. Örültem, hogy itt voltál. Azt szeretném, ha nyugodtan itt ülnél, majd jön egy kísérő, aki elkísér.
Nagyon jó volt, mert tényleg olyan volt, mint egy kuckot, tehát így azonnal egy ilyen nagyon személyes térbe kerültem, ami teljesen azonnal magával ragadott ezekkel a fényképekkel, mert pont szembe velem egy szoptatós kép volt, meg nagyon jó mondatok voltak, meg látszott, hogy gyerekrajz, szóval azonnal egy életet éreztem. Olyan volt valóban, mint hogyha a saját anyukám lenne, vagy én, mint mikor anyuka voltam, vagy most is az vagyok, mikor odalépett hozzám az Ágnes, gondolom ő volt az, ilyen nagyon kedves volt, és etetett, és nagyon szép volt.
Well, when we started this project, we had 10 gypsy women, and they said to me, like, okay, I will do this with you, but we really don't think that this is going to happen. You know, people don't like us. People don't want us here. So we will do this. We will participate in your project, but don't expect anything of this. So I said, well, yeah, I don't know. Let's just try and see. And we have been feeding 400 people over 4 days. And these people were really interested to know about these ladies. Some of them wanted to find out who they were, and some of them wanted to have their contact details. And you could really see these ladies who started like this, you could see them becoming proud, and you could see them becoming happy to actually be able to share their stories. And the reason why I didn't want them to see each other, first so you could relax to be fed, but also afterwards, is that I was hoping that people would make a kind of generalization. I was hoping that when they would go out into the streets, that they would think, oh, maybe it's her, or maybe this is her brother. And if they would find out who she was, then they could think, yeah, I still don't like all these gypsies, but she's nice. And I really wanted people to make a kind of broader view on it. The balloon that you saw that the visitors could take home was a balloon that had a scent inside. So in this case, because this lady was talking about oranges, the scent of orange was inside the balloon. So if they would take the balloon home and would smell it again, I was hoping that they would make a kind of smell memory to her, and that they would remember her story again. The most left-wing and the most right-wing newspaper of Hungary started to write about this project, and the whole debate about gypsy integration was kind of renewed in a more humane way, which for me was very wonderful, because I would never think that my project would actually have that kind of effect. So you would think that this project is a big success, but during the week that we did this with these ladies, two young girls, they said, wow, we are feeling so good. Tonight we're going to go out, we're going dancing. So I said, okay, well, good luck, see you tomorrow. And the next day they came back, so I asked them, like, how was the dancing? Did you have a good time? And they said, well, we went to 6 clubs, but we were all rejected. So we went home. And then I thought, you know, it's very little steps. I think art projects that care about discrimination and integration are very necessary, but it goes very small steps at the time, because reality sometimes catches up. But now we are talking with the ladies, so they can maybe take this project by themselves and go on a tour around the country to continue with it. So I hope that will work out. So that's what I wanted to share with you today. Thank you for listening.
Well, thank you very
ここ
much
から
for
は
the
ですね、さら
interesting
にもっ
lecture.
と聞きたい方々いらっしゃると思うの
I
で、
believe many people
学
have
芸
a
の熊
lot
谷の方から
of
いろいろ
questions.
村井
So
さんにお
we
話、
have
インタビュ
Kumagai-san
ーしていきたいと思います。
to serve as the MC here and facilitator to ask
村井さん、
questions.
またよろしくお願いします。
So Now, first of all, and thank you very much for coming on a weekend from early in the morning. So with Ms. Inaniwa and Professor Ito introduced the art communication, I am doing that as a curator. And in the pamphlet, in the brochure, it introduces some of the project that I am involved in, and I have been given 30 minutes or so. I would like to ask questions to Mariah and share our conversation with you. So now, as you said, each person will have individual memories, experiences, and through that we're trying to link people together. We heard about your project and it was really inspiring. And food is used as a tool. And I believe that food has a lot of potential. Now, I met Mariah only one time before. This is my second meeting with her. Last year in October, I went to the Netherlands for a survey on art and communication and how food can connect people. So I went all the way to the Netherlands for my survey. So that was October last year. October is where the Design Academy Eindhoven has the Dutch Design Week, which is the biggest design market in the Netherlands. And of course, I was able to see her installation and artworks. And it was especially focused on food system. So I was able to see that. I also went to the Eindhoven graduation artwork exhibition. And I was able to see a lot of artworks based on the theme of food and food culture. It was a really interesting experience for me. And because of that experience, I have been appointed as the interviewer. Now, Design Academy Eindhoven, that's where you graduated and you became an eating designer. So, what inspired you to become an eating designer? I understand that that was the Japanese food or bento lunchboxes. So could you share with us your episodes concerning Japanese food and bento boxes?
Yeah, it's interesting. I grew up in the Netherlands. Oh, thank you. It's interesting. I grew up in the Netherlands, and I'm not sure if you know about our food culture, but due to Calvinism, it's quite poor actually. Especially the type of flavors are kind of bland. And I remember as a child that that my parents would serve me every day. It's kind of similar kind of food, and I remember that I was thinking, is there not something else in the world? But back then in the Netherlands, we didn't have a lot of influence of other kinds of cuisines. And it was only until I was about 18 years old that I went to London, where I first had my encounter with Japanese food, and where I thought, there is something else, which really inspired me. So I went back to Eindhoven, where I lived at that point, and I went to the library and I got a lot of Japanese cooking books, well, not a lot, because there were just a few. And I started making this food and getting very interested in it. And for me, it was a very big inspiration to actually start my first project, which I did with food, which was actually a funeral dinner. But many of the aesthetics of that dinner was inspired by Japanese culture. So that was really great for me. And also bento boxes have been a great inspiration, because to pack things as a kind of gift, some kind of surprise box that also carries a lot of emotion and memories and love, actually. It's a very emotional thing. It's very inspiring for me.
Thank you. So this was in London, not in the Netherlands. So all over the world, you've been moving around, you've been very active. I think it was an episode that's typical of you. And we talked about white and the funeral. And in Eindhoven, when you were a student, there's a work you created. So funeral food was all made with white food. So I'd like to continue asking you questions. So Japanese food culture gave you inspiration. Plus, at the Design Academy, food as materials, ingredients, you focused on this. But to start out with, before that, regarding food or regarding communication, your interest in food or communication. So what was the background to your developing in this way?
Well, I think many of these things are kind of organic. It's not like you're a student and then you look forward and then you know what to do. Not at all, actually. As a student, you just try and you do, and you don't really know where you're going. And even because I did not graduate with food, actually my first project with food was a year before I graduated. And then people told me, I'm sure you're going to graduate with food, because at that time it was such a new thing as a designer to be working with food. And actually I was scared to graduate with food because I was scared that I was going to be the food girl and that I could never design anything else anymore. And now I am actually really happy that I'm the food girl, because at that point I didn't see the potential of it yet. And it's interesting because some people back then have been telling me, like, yeah, it's a bit of a housewife subject, and isn't food only something for chefs? But now we have a much larger notion of the importance of food, especially when it comes to our food system, but also with our changing lives, and that a lot of people don't respect food that much anymore. So it took a very long road to understand that this is actually, for me, I think it is the most important material that you could work with as a designer. You know, of course you can make more chairs and you can make more tables, but we have a lot of chairs, we have a lot of tables, so maybe it's good to start to look at the whole system of food and the meaning of that.
I see, thank you. So in doing such designs, Mariah-san, your philosophy in eating design, I'm sure there are a lot of things you think are important, but Japanese food culture, what's the relationship, do you think?
Well, I think, there are many things in Japanese food culture that are for me very interesting and very inspiring. Of course, there are many things, for example, that when you have a dish that it can actually change during the course of the meal, which is something that you hardly ever see in European culture. So for example, if you have shabu shabu, the dish really transforms within one meal. That's kind of a detail, but for me it's very interesting to look at it like that. You want to know about the inspiration, or do you want to?
So in your design philosophy, the relationship with your design philosophy in Japanese food, could you talk about that?
Yeah, I think, so what I try to do is, I see very interesting things in Japanese food culture that I kind of bring to my work, but in a very different way, because, for example, I also work a lot with touch, with people and touch, which is something which is not very Japanese, but I try to find the human connection in that way. So some things I think are very much inspired by Japanese culture, and other things are very much not. But I think within this, you can create like a new level of culture. I think one of the great things about Japanese culture is the aesthetics of the food, But to me, it also makes me wonder, like if you have one beautiful carrot in one beautiful plastic wrapper, then where are all the carrots that were not beautiful? And how about all the ways that you make when you pack everything really beautifully? So I think there is a kind of beautiful paradox in there of beauty, but also the effect of it. So that's something that I think it's an interesting challenge. You know, how can you still remain to find the most perfect things, and how can you also do this in an environmentally friendly way? Because nature is a very big inspiration, I think. So how can you do that in a way to actually really serve nature?
I see, thank you. Next, earlier on, Ito-san gave us a presentation of the Tobira project. And I'd like to ask some questions about the Tobira project. And today, Tobira or former Tobiras, art communicators are here. Could you raise your hand if you're an art communicator, a Tobira or a former one? Oh, there are quite a few of them. And these people are Tobiras. And Maraya-san, regarding the Tobira project, what's your frank opinion after hearing about the Tobira project?
Yeah, I think the Tobira project is a fantastic project because sometimes when we look at art, we kind of have the feeling, I think worldwide, when art is in a museum, we take it very much out of its context. So you only put the piece in the museum, and then people don't know anymore why it was there or what it really does. And then they don't really know how to look for it. And then you create a distance between the art and the people that are watching it. And I think that is a shame. And I really like to see, when I saw the presentation this morning, I really like to see how you use art in a different way to really make a connection between people. I think it's a wonderful project. I'm really impressed by it.
Thank you. So you talked about bonds, connections. So what Tobira is doing, creating connections or valuing diversity, communication design, or a flat relationship. So in your projects too, I think you utilize and value things like that. So compared to your projects regarding Tobira, do you have any impressions?
I'm sorry, I don't understand your question.
So are there any points common between your projects and the Tobira projects? Anything common?
Yeah, I think there is a lot of things in common, and I think you can see what is in common a lot. And I think it's quite obvious what is in common. I think I would like to know, how could you? So this is a really great starting point, I think, to do that in a museum. But how could you? Would there be a way to actually take it out of the museum to really? How can you make it filter through into the whole society? That would be interesting to find out.
Thank you. So little by little, the museum, and around us we have Ueno Park. So the museum and the park around it, we're trying to make that into a whole museum, or we're trying to turn the whole Ueno area into a museum. We're trying to form linkages.
Yeah, I very much like that. I think it's a great idea.
Thank you. Now, moving on to my questions. So, as we've seen in your presentation, you have all kinds of food-related projects being carried out around the world. So, through such projects, what kind of society do you want to create? If you have an image of what kind of society it is that you want to create through your projects?
Well, yeah, some people have seen my projects and then they said, oh, that's a very feminine project. And I think it's interesting when people say something like that because it tells me more about them than about me, actually. But I think, well, we are with many people in the world, and what I see when I travel is that everybody is really the same. We all sleep, we all eat, we all have children that we love. We can be sad. You know, it's super simple. I think sometimes we make things overcomplicated. And I think that is basically what I want to do, is to actually show with my projects that, you know, as human beings, we are actually very simple. We have the same kind of basic functioning thing. And I think many times art or design is not functioning on that basic level. It's very much focusing onto a kind of higher intellectual idea, whereas I think why not just keep it very simple first and see what connects us instead of what divides us. And I think I'm not saying that we should all hold hands the whole day or hug everybody the whole day, but I do think when you look at the world with more respect towards food or towards each other or towards animals as well. Within the Design Academy, for example, we also design for animals. I think this can have a really good effect. And the other thing is that if you actually look at everybody like that, like we are all the same, then you can also enable people to be very different, because you see that on the basic level you are very much the same. And then people could be very different, but you can still accept that. And especially in Europe, we are dealing now with a lot of immigrants, which causes a lot of friction between people. And I'm always kind of sad to see that people are not accepting that basically we are actually the same. So why should you reject people? Because if you see that, then it's actually nice that the other person has a different culture. It's actually nice that the other person maybe is a man and loves a man, or it's actually nice that people have their own kinds of expressions. So I think my work really wants to connect from here, and if you are connected here, then this part can go everywhere.
Thank you very much. I truly agree with you. I also see the diversity in people, and we are hoping that we can respect that diversity through our Tobira project. And I think you are looking at that through food. Each individual will choose what they eat, and then they realize what they eat, and through that, well, of course, we do have this capitalist system, and but I think food could be something, a basic thing that we can really retrieve our real being. And you said we are being linked here, and you talked about those who break bread cannot break the other's neck, but we often talk about eating out of the same pot of rice. I think that's quite common. So I now understand the kind of society you imagine, but I think it's not just our generation, but the next generation education is going to be key if we want to realize such a society. So at the Design Academy Eindhoven, you have graduated there, but now you are the head of the food and non-food department. So can you tell us about the characteristic of the education provided, and how are the students creating their works of art?
Thank you. Yeah, so the Design Academy has 8 departments, and they all have a different focus. It's more like a different mentality than really a different subject. So everybody studying at the Design Academy eventually has the same diploma. So they are all designer from Design Academy. But every department has has a different kind of approach. So the first year is a general year, and after that you have 3 years in your department. So I am head of one department focusing on food and design, and it's called now Food Non-Food, and we will change it to Man and Food next year. So it's aligned with all the rest of the departments, because all the departments are called Man and Living, Man and Well-being, Man and Communication, for example. And it's all focused on the human, but as I already said, we are also focusing on animals, actually, because we also work with agriculture, but we also work with retail, like food retail. We also work with like the food bank, and the whole build-up of the education is to, first of all, make a strong designer, because I think if you're a strong designer and you enter the world is continuously changing. So we cannot prepare you to be like a graphic designer in this sense, or a food designer in that sense, because you don't know where the world is when you graduate. So we need to make sure that all the students that graduate with us, they very strongly know who they are inside. So it's in that sense a very individual training. We try to coach everybody on an individual level, so they are very that they know what their personal power is. So we don't have like a general program for everybody. We really look at who are you and what could you bring to the world, what are you good at, and how can we support you in doing that. And that is really a very precise way of teaching. So within trying to make a strong designer who knows who they are, we offer a very broad program related to the food world. So I want my designers to know how the food system works. Well, actually no one really knows how the food system works. But I want them to know as good as possible how the food system works. I want them also just to go to farmers and to just work with them and to be in the manure and to clean the cases of the animals. But also I want them to understand the mental part of working with food. I want them to understand the psychology. I want them to understand about poverty. I want them to understand about food industry. So it's a very wide, and also science is a part of that. It's a very wide program that we try to squeeze into 3 years, which is not very easy. But we have had our first graduates actually a few weeks ago. And so this year at the graduation show, which is in October, we will have our first food non-food graduates.
Well, thank you. Here in Japan, maybe universities are different, but we tend to have a narrow focus on the area of expertise. But it seems that you have a very integrated, a comprehensive education related to food. You said 3 years? A very squeezed-in program. Yes, and well, yes, hearing that really excited me. I felt like I wanted to go and study. Now,
I want to go too.
So, the education activity that you have at the academy, and also I understand food designers or eating designers, you're trying to create a network among them so that you can nurture the next generation. So can you tell us about your activity in this area?
Yeah. First of all, about the students, they will not be food experts, because the whole world of food is already filled with food experts. You know, the whole food chain, every little part of the chain has an expert, and this expert knows exactly what to do to, for example, get the most milk out of a cow, or they know exactly what to do to make the best advertising in food. So I don't need my students to know how to be experts. I want my students to be able to know where these experts are and to collaborate with them. So I think the designer of the future is a collaborating designer. So they understand the language of these specialists, and then they can make cross connections. They can make connections that are unexpected. They can link the farmer to the mother, for example, or they can link the politician to the logistics industry, for example. So they have this ability to move beyond. So that's why I want them to be a really strong designer, so they know that they can lean on themselves, but then within about the food aspect, they can just be a generalist, and they can just move in a very fluid way because the food system will change every time. And then about the next generation, so I started this non-food department just 3 years ago. And I was thinking about myself as a designer making a new field of design, which is not always easy. You know, you have to explain what you do, and sometimes people don't understand what to do with you. And I have also colleague designers now that are working with food, and also for them, they are struggling with the same things. And I see that a lot of people don't know yet about eating design. They don't know really what to do with it, or they think it's just me doing it, or just my colleagues doing it. But when I travel around the world, I actually see that in all the countries, there are more and more people focusing on food and design. So I decided to set up an NGO called the Dutch Institute of Food and Design, which will be a global platform. Because if we can link all these people together that work in food and design, then it's not only me doing something anymore, but you can see that actually it is a global movement of many people all together working in this field. And also for my students, once they are finished with their studies, I want to make this platform so they have somewhere to go to, because if you work in graphic design or you work in photography, then there are many platforms where you can show your work. There are many platforms that you can connect yourself to. But within food and design, there is not one platform that's really there for you. So I really want this to be the place where you can connect to. And also I want to show the industry like what we are doing, so they know what they can gain from us. Because I see that in agriculture and also in food industry, people are searching for different ways, because we all see actually it's not going the right way, but we don't really know how to change it. So if I can show what these designers could bring for them, maybe it can accelerate their activities in a positive way.
That's right, I see. So by linking networks all over the world, eating, design, and eating designers can be linked, and you can show the whole world and be recognized. You can link people. So we can do that. And here in Japan too, that would be nice if you could do that. Now lastly, right at the beginning, when we introduced Ito-san or Inaniwa-san talked about how artists recently, it's not just painting or it's just not doing sculptures, they want to be involved with society. Communication is the theme of many of their works. And of course, Maraye-san too, you're an eating designer, so you are involved in society. So here, I'd like to ask you this question. Art and design. What do you think is the difference or the borderline between art and design?
Yeah, you're not the first person asking this question. And it's interesting because, well, I talk about myself as a designer just because I had design education. And I always work with my work always has a purpose. So it's always intended for someone else. It's never just because I want to make it. And for me, that makes it clear to me I'm a designer, whereas, of course, many artists also make work for someone else. So I think there is a big blur. And also, I know some people have been looking at my work, and then they say, yeah, isn't this just more performance art you're doing? Why do you still call it design? And, you know, I think, why should we talk about the difference? Because I think it is interesting that art and design is blurring. And I think you should just use the way of expression that really fits what you want to express. And I think that is what it should be. So I don't mind if people call me an artist or a performance artist or a cleaning lady. I just do the work that I think I should do, and I think that's the best position, you know, for anybody to take. Also, if you're an artist or if you're a designer. So I think I'm happy to make it blur. Oh, and can I maybe add about the Dutch Institute of Food and Design that we have an award which you still can send in your work until the 30th of July. It is the Future Food Design Award. So if you know anybody who would be interested to join, it's free to join. And we have two awards, one of €5,000, one of €2,500. So it's really worthwhile to do it. And eventually, if you could win the prize, then we also exhibit your work at the Dutch Design Week next year. So it's an opportunity maybe.
Yes, though, maybe there's someone here who is involved in good design. And from Maraye-san's website, you can link to the Food Design Network, isn't that right? There's a link?
Yeah, it's actually the Dutch Institute of Food and Design, it's the DIFT. Well, just Google it, it will be there.
Yes, so you can Google it, and you can have your work exhibited at Dutch Design Week next year. That's wonderful. So here, I would like to end my interview with Maraye-san. Thank you very much, Maraye-san. So it's now 12:15. Until 12:30, we'd like to take questions from the audience. I'm sure there are people dying to ask questions. There are 2 people, 3 people maybe, that we can take questions from. Would you like to raise your hand? If you have a question, the microphone will be taken to you. Does anyone have any questions about the presentation so far? Something you'd like to ask or confirm? Yes, over here. Thank you for your presentation. I wanted to ask about in Japan. So eating design, maybe I don't understand enough yet, but listening, I thought in Japan there's a service. There's a recipe service called Cookpad. And so people can post recipes. So this is kind of linked, I think, to eating design. It's similar. If you know about Cookpad, would you like to comment on that? So the Cookpad system, explaining it is difficult, but are you aware of this website, Cookpad? So people, the general public, can take their recipes and upload it onto the web, so that when people Google, their recipe appears. So we no longer buy recipe books. We can just Google, and we get the recipes of a lot of different people. It's quite a large-scale website called Cookpad. And this too, maybe, could be considered to be eating design. I think that was what the question was.
Yeah, I think as long as there is a kind of creative element of imagination in the work, then maybe it's eating design.
Thank you.
Yes, the next question. The person wearing green.
Hi. I was wondering, when you decide what you do in a project, if you decide our target audience, or if you decide, how do you choose it and why?
Yeah, many of my projects are commissioned projects, so the target group is already quite clear because the client has a target group. But I also do a lot of self-initiated projects, and generally my target group is people with a mouth.
All right.
Yeah, because I think when you work on this kind of, as I explained before, at this basic level where I think everybody relates to, everybody has been fed, everybody understands taste, everybody understands sharing food, for example, then you don't have to look at target group that much because everybody can do something with it. And everybody is involved with the food system as well. You don't have to understand high culture because everybody understands the food. Well, not everybody understands the food system, but we are all part of the food system.
Yeah. It just when you want to promote your event or workshop, then I think thinking about the target audience, what kind of social media they use, what kind of things they want to invite friends to, the target might be important.
Yeah, I think generally when I have an event, generally people who are already interested in design go there. But sometimes I actually hope, for example, with the Gypsy project, that people who don't know anything, generally the people who are already interested in art and design already have an open mind to other people. So I sometimes try to also get people in that are not so open-minded yet, because I think that would be much more interesting.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, the person next to the person next to that person. Thank you for your presentation. It was very interesting. Earlier on, there was a question, and my question is similar maybe. So, people who participate in your projects, they're interested to start out with, I think. That's why they participate. But people who are not that interested, people who are not aware of the issues, is there any way to approach such people not yet interested?
Well, I never want to force people to participate in my projects, because if you would force people to do that, then they will not be open for it anyway, and I think then it doesn't work. So you do need to kind of make sure that people want to do it, because I don't want to give people an unpleasant experience, because I don't think that that would work. But still, I think whenever I do a project, I try to make sure that even if you're kind of unsure about it, that you feel comfortable. So I always make sure that these details are in a way so that the food is of good quality, that the service is of good quality, so that even if you don't want to know about the second layer, that in the first layer you can just have a good time. And that's what I try to do anyway. So in that sense, I make it in a way that it's approachable.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hello, so thank you. I'm glad to hear your lecture today, and today is the first time I heard about eating design, and I'm really impressed about that fresh idea. I also want to be a designer in the future. I want to know your mindset as a designer, because I want to find a new idea or overcome the stereotypes and give an impression to the other people. So that's why I want to know any mindset or your thinking technology, techniques, or your habits as a designer. So I wanna anyway. So I wanna know any tips as a designer. So can you tell me some advice?
Yeah, what works for me are a couple of things that also I try to give my students, is that they should also try to fail. I think that is a very important thing, that if you always try to succeed and never fail, then you don't learn. I think the way to learn is actually a lot through failing, and it's okay to fail. Actually, we always, in a way, we're kind of happy sometimes when our students fail, because this is the moment that you learn, this is the moment that you grow. And I think that is a very important thing also for me to, when I make a new project, sometimes how do you say that? I make sure that, sometimes I make sure that it's going too far, so I know that I might fail. But that gives you attention, and you don't get lazy because you always have to be on top of it. I think also experimenting is very important, just to do things, not because you know why you're doing it, but just to do it and then to understand. And then the last thing that I think is actually, for me, is even more important than anything else, is to know that intuitively I do the right thing. So I always I can really, if I make a design, I can feel it in my body if I do the right thing. And then I know it will work. And I think it is very important to be able to trust yourself. And this is something also learning over time. I always know when I've found the right thing, then I know it's right. And I think that is actually the key to many things.
Thank you a lot.
Thank you.
Excuse me. Earlier on, you showed us Budapest. Among those photographs, the participants, some were weeping. So in one respect, in the project, it's part of the project, but it was like therapeutic maybe. There was a therapy effect. People feel purified, and that person will be able to take action. So it's therapeutic, maybe it's part of medicine. So Maraye-san, regarding treatment, medicine, and art, what about the relationship or the possibility or potential? What do you think about the potential between art and healing people? Because things related, are there any approaches that are already being taken? Or Maraye-san, I'd like to hear your way of thinking regarding this.
Yeah, it's actually interesting that you say that. Yeah, I've been doing other projects as well where we have been feeding people who were in a row, sitting in a row, and they were lying on a pillow with their heads. And we have been feeding them, but we were also stroking their back very gently without any sexual idea, just, touching someone's back. And actually, we had everybody crying because it's not something we are used to anymore in our daily society, to have this kind of gentle touch. And many people told me then that they actually, in a therapeutic way, felt like renewed or like whole again. Actually, that was a gentleman telling me that he felt that he was back into his mother's womb and that he was feeling whole again, which for me is a very great expression to me. I was very grateful for that. But I think this is one thing that you could do, but sometimes I think healing can also be friction, and I think that is a great place where art is. I think art can also sometimes make you shocked, or art can also sometimes make you uncomfortable, but I think that is also a very, very important and positive thing to encounter, because if you always stay into your comfort zone, then you sometimes do not grow. So I think art is actually a great thing that we really need into our lives to as a kind of stone to reflect on, as a kind of stone to sharpen your mind on. And I think in that sense, many kinds of art are a medicine, I think. Thank you.
はい、すごいだんだん深い話になってきましたが、時間がそろそろ来ましたので、もうこの辺りにしたいと思うんですが、そうですね。 マラエさんの今見ていただいた動画ですとか、それからこれまでの作品というものもマラエさんのお名前で検索していただくとウェブサイトありまして、そちらの方ですごい映像も美しいものがたくさんありますので、ぜひ皆さんご覧になってみてください。今日は本当にいろいろな興味深いお話ありがとうございました。ではこれにて扉オープンレクチャー第7回目を終わりにしたいと思います。皆さん扉プロジェクトのことも引き続き関心を持っていただければと思います。ありがとうございました。
Tobira project as well. Thank you.